The stars were dying. One by one, their light guttered out into the cold void, their embers swallowed by an eternity that cared nothing for the warmth of life. Across the galaxy, the ancient suns that had burned since the birth of the first empires dimmed like candles before a storm. In that fading light, the Cadian gates smoldered, a wound in reality where the raw madness of the warp spilled into real space, saturating every breath of air, every inch of stone, every trembling soul that dared stand against it. On the walls of Kasser Lord Marshal Kalen Vare stood motionless beneath a sky lit by fire and shadow. The air reeked of promethium, burnt flesh, and ozone. Somewhere beyond the horizon, artillery thundered against the earth in a ceaseless rhythm, the heartbeat of a war older than his bloodline. Yet his eyes were not on the enemy lines, but upon the singular horror in the heavens. A sun turned black. It did not blaze. It devoured, drinking the light from the stars around it until the night itself seemed to shiver. It was an omen. Every Cadian knew it, though no one dared speak its name aloud. Whispers spoke of the black sun as the herald of the final gate, the moment when the last bastion of the Imperium would fall, and the tides of the eye would drown the galaxy whole. Kalen had seen many omens in his lifetime, bleeding moons, ash rain, the screaming shadows that fled from dawn. But this one clawed at his mind like a living thing. The Voxnet crackled in his ear. Reports poured in. Another Cassar had fallen in the north, the bastion walls buckled under siege artillery. The outer ring was lost. He acknowledged each message with clipped precision, but his voice carried none of the fire that had once driven his command. His men still believed him a bulwark of iron, but deep within the foundations were crumbling. He had heard the voice again, soft, patient, neither cruel nor kind. It spoke as though it had been with him since his first breath, waiting for this moment. You do not have to die here. You could live beyond this. You could be more than mortal. It never demanded, never threatened. It simply offered. And that was what made it dangerous. Kalen gripped the parapet, feeling the scarred rockcrete grind beneath his gauntlets. His life had been service. Every day, every thought, every breath given to the throne. He had bled for the Emperor. He had killed without hesitation. He had stood when entire worlds fell around him. But he had also watched the Imperium sacrifice its own with the same cold arithmetic it used to measure rations or ammunition. The Emperor demanded everything, yet gave nothing back. The sky rippled with a distant explosion. The black sun seemed to flare, and for a heartbeat, Kalen thought he saw something move within it. Vast wings of shadow stretching across the firmament, a crown of jagged light that pierced the void. He blinked, and it was gone, replaced by the eternal hunger of that dead star. "My lord," came the voice of Captain Dravik, stepping beside him. "The men are ready for your word. They will hold until the last." Kalen looked at the man, a soldier who had followed him through 7 campaigns, who had watched brothers fall and cities burn without ever questioning the cause. There was loyalty here, yes, but there was also resignation. They all knew the truth. No reinforcements would come. Cadia was alone. He opened his mouth to speak, but the wind shifted. A faint chime, as of metal striking stone, rang behind him. He turned. There, standing in the shadow of a broken archway, was the figure he had seen before. Tall, draped in tattered robes the color of starlight, face hidden beneath a mask of black iron etched with patterns that seemed to shift when one looked too long. In its hands was a small object, wrapped in cloth so dark it seemed to drink the light. The figure inclined its head as though greeting an old friend. "It begins," it said, the voice neither male nor female, but carrying the weight of ages. "Your world falls, Lord Marshal, but it does not have to be your end." Kalen's breath misted in the cold air. He glanced at Dravik, but the captain seemed not to notice the stranger at all. His eyes fixed instead on the enemy lines, unaware of what stood only paces away. "You should not be here," Kalen said quietly. "And yet I am," the figure replied. "The moment you were born, the first stone was set in a wall that led here to this night. You have been shaped for this choice, Kalen Vare. Die a mortal, or live to see the end of all things." The chime sounded again, though the figure had not moved. Kalen's heartbeat was steady, but his mind churned with a cold, measured terror. He had fought heretics, Xenos, demons. He had stared into the warp-lit eyes of traitor lords and felt no fear. But this was different. This was temptation. The black sun pulsed above them and the mask tilted as if the figure listened to its rhythm. Before the marshal could reply, the world shuddered. From the west, a titanic roar split the night as the first wave of the Chaos Offensive crashed against the outer walls. The ground trembled beneath the weight of the enemy's approach. Vox channels erupted with desperate voices. The siege had begun in full. The figure stepped back into the shadows. "Choose well, Lord Marshal, for your choice will echo through the bones of the galaxy." And then it was gone. Kalen turned back to the horizon, the fires of war blooming like poisoned flowers across the plains. His men awaited his command, his people their salvation. Yet his eyes lifted once more to the black sun, and in its lightless heart he thought he saw the faintest outline of a throne. We will tell this story together, and it will not be one of easy heroes or simple truths. We will tell of loyalty and betrayal, of choices that damn and decisions that save, sometimes in the same breath. And we truly love and care for you, the one hearing these words now. Before we begin the story, tell us, where in the world are you watching from and what time is it there? Now grab your coffee and let's get started. The city was a fortress built on the bones of older fortresses, each wall raised upon the ruins of the one before it. Caserver had stood through 1,000 sieges, but now its battlements seemed smaller, its walls thinner, and every street a funnel for blood. The drums of artillery beyond the outer ring beat a relentless rhythm, shaking dust from the vaulted ceilings of the command chamber where Kalen Vare stood over the strategium table. Hololithic projectors painted the map in cold blue light, enemy formations like veins of fire encircling the city, pushing forward in 3 spearheads. The Cadian regiment still held the inner ring, but the cost had been catastrophic. Names scrolled endlessly across the casualty register, flickering in and out as comms cut and reconnected under the strain of the siege. Every lost signal might mean a retreat, or worse, a silence no one could afford to investigate. Across the table, Inquisitor Selhara Vale watched him with the sharp, unblinking gaze of a hawk. Her black carapace armor bore the sigil of the Ordo Hereticus, the purity seals along her vambrace fluttering with each draft that slid through the cracked windows. She had been on Cadia only 3 weeks before the siege began, but Kalen suspected she had known more of this war's shape than she let on. "You met it again," she said flatly. Kalen didn't answer at once. The map's light washed his face in cold shadow as he traced the enemy movements with a gloved finger. "I met no one," he replied. Selhara leaned forward. "Don't lie to me. I've seen your eyes after you speak with it. You don't blink as much. You look at the enemy like you've already beaten them. That's not the gaze of a man preparing to die for the Emperor. It's the look of someone who thinks they've found a way to survive. Would you prefer I looked like a man who's already given up?" Kalen asked, voice low, almost calm. Her jaw tightened. "I prefer the man I came to Cadia to work with. The one who wouldn't so much as take a glass of water without first asking whether it was drawn from loyal hands." She paused, then added, not the one who holds whispered counsels with a thing he refuses to name. The room shuddered as a distant shell hit one of the outer walls. Dust cascaded from the ceiling, hissing where it touched the hot surface of the lumen strips. Neither of them looked away from the other. Kalen had fought alongside Selhara once, years before on the ash world of Telkoth. She had dragged him from the wreckage of his own command tank, firing her bolt pistol one-handed while pulling him to safety. That kind of loyalty didn't fade, but it could twist, turning to suspicion if the bond frayed enough. And now, it was fraying. Reports from the outer bastions came in. Casualties mounting, ammunition running low. The voice in Kalen's mind whispered again, smooth and cold, promising strength enough to shatter the siege in a single night. Selhara's hand moved to the bolt pistol on her hip. "Tell me what it wants." "It offers a choice," Kalen said before he could stop himself. "A choice between what? To die here, or not." The pistol cleared its holster, slow, deliberate. "That's not a choice. That's a test." He looked at her and saw no hatred, only fear. Not fear for herself, but for him, for the city, perhaps even for the Imperium. But that fear hardened into resolve as she raised the weapon, keeping it aimed squarely at his chest. "You know what I have to do if I think you've been compromised," she said. Before he could answer, the strategium doors burst open. Captain Dravik staggered inside, helmet in one hand, blood streaking the other. "Marshal, enemy armor is pushing through the western breach. We can't hold without reinforcements." Selhara's pistol didn't waver. Kalen didn't move. The voice in his mind spoke again. "One word, and the breach will close forever. They will fear you more than the storm." Kalen gave Dravik his orders. "Hold the breach. I'll be there myself." The captain hesitated, then saluted and left as quickly as he came. Selhara lowered her pistol only enough to speak through clenched teeth. "I will find out what it is. And when I do, Kalen, if it's not the Emperor's will you're following." "Then what?" he asked. Her gaze was cold. "Then Cadia will survive without you." They left the strategium together, but not side by side. The air outside was thick with smoke and the electric tang of lasfire. Above, the black sun hung motionless, drinking the light from the battlefield. Somewhere beyond the ruins, in the cold places where even the warp's madness feared to linger, the masked figure waited, and Kalen knew he would go to it again. The nights during the siege were worse than the days. In the daylight there was the noise of battle, artillery, gunfire, shouted orders, the screams of the dying, to drown the thoughts that gnawed at Kalen's mind. But at night, when the guns paused only long enough for both sides to reload and reposition, the silence between the shell bursts seemed to draw the whispers closer. He walked the empty corridors of the upper bastion, where shattered windows looked out across the killing fields. The darkness was alive with muzzle flashes and the distant glow of burning cassers. His reflection in the glass looked older than he remembered, though his body felt stronger than it had in years. He had taken a wound 3 days earlier, a shard of shrapnel driven deep into his thigh, but it was gone now, the skin smooth where it should have been raw and scarred. That was the gift, though he had not yet named it aloud. The masked envoy had pressed a shard into his hand the night they first spoke, small enough to close in his fist, warm as blood and cold as stone. He kept it now in the inner pocket of his greatcoat, though he swore he could feel its presence even when it wasn't touching his skin. The dreams had started soon after. He saw great black pyramids drifting through starless voids, their surfaces veined with lines of green fire. He walked among beings whose faces were made of living metal, their voices like the tolling of funeral bells. He saw a crown of impossible size, suspended above a throne that seemed to sit at the center of the galaxy, and always, in those dreams, the black sun hung above, watching. A scraping sound drew his attention back to the corridor. Sergeant Avarn stepped into view, her helmet under one arm, her las rifle slung but ready. Her eyes flicked to him, then away. "Marshal, the men are talking." "About what?" "About you." She hesitated as though weighing whether to speak. "They say you don't sleep, that you've stopped eating, that you heal too fast." "Superstition spreads fast under siege," Kalen said, starting past her. She moved to block his path. "I've served under you for years. I've seen you hold the line against things that would make most men drop their weapons and run, but this, whatever you've done, whatever you're becoming, it's not just the war wearing on you." The thought of telling her the truth rose for a moment, but he crushed it down. "You have your orders, Sergeant. Keep the men ready. That's all you need to worry about." Her jaw tightened. "And if your orders lead us into something worse than the enemy outside the walls?" Before Kalen could answer, the floor shook with a distant detonation. The Vox at her hip crackled with panicked voices. Enemy forces had breached the outer Hab sector. Avarna gave him one last look before running toward the nearest stairwell. Kalen didn't follow her. Instead, he went deeper into the bastion, past locked gates and warning runes painted on the walls in the blood of saints. The air grew colder with each step until frost began to bloom on the stone. The corridors were lit only by the faint glow from cracks in the rock, like veins of green light pulsing from far below. He found the envoy waiting in the arch of a collapsed doorway, the mask tilted slightly as if studying him. "The fractures widen," it said, voice low and unhurried. "The walls will not stand another night." Kalen stepped closer. "You promised me strength, enough to break the siege. And I will give it," the envoy replied. "But power is not gifted without bond. You must accept the chain as well as the blade." "What chain?" The envoy extended a hand. In its palm lay another shard, larger than the first, its edges shifting like liquid metal. "This will make you more than a man. Your wounds will never claim you again. Your enemies will break against you as water on stone." Kalen stared at it. He could feel the hum in his bones, the weight of something older than humanity itself. A shout echoed from far above, someone calling his name. The voice was Selhara's. She was close, and from the sound of it, she was coming for him. The envoy's mask caught the faint green light and turned it into something sharp and dangerous. "Choose now. She will not understand, but she will live if you do this. They all will." Selhara's footsteps pounded down the hall. Kalen reached out. The shard was warm in his hand, almost alive. Selhara rounded the corner, her bolt pistol rising, her voice cutting through the cold. "Step away from it, Kalen." The envoy did not move. The black sun's light seemed to flicker in the shard's surface. And Kalen did not let go. The shard burned against Kalen's palm, its warmth sinking into his skin until he could no longer tell where his flesh ended and the alien metal began. It pulsed once, slow, deliberate, and the sound of the battle outside seemed to fade, replaced by a low, steady rhythm like the heartbeat of a giant sleeping deep beneath the earth. Selhara advanced, her bolt pistol fixed on the envoy. "Put it down," she said, her voice tight. "That thing is not salvation, it's a leash." Kalen's breathing slowed. Every part of him screamed to move toward her, to take her hand, to let her pull him away from the figure in the shadows. But another voice whispered just as clearly in his mind. Smooth, patient, without doubt. "She fears the change because she cannot see the end." "You can." The envoy inclined its head as if amused. "She is loyal. That loyalty could serve you well if you survive long enough to command it." "I said put it down," Selhara repeated. Her pistol didn't waver, but her eyes searched his face, looking for something. Remorse, recognition, the man she had followed through a dozen campaigns. Kalen closed his fist around the shard. Pain knifed up his arm, white-hot, and then vanished, replaced by an unnatural clarity. He could hear every breath Selhara took, every faint groan of the bastion's stone under the distant bombardment. Outside, the Vox crackled with urgent reports, enemy armor breaching the second wall, civilians trapped in the Manufacturum district, the reserves cut off. The war was slipping away from him by the minute. "I can't win this without it," he said at last. "You can't win with it," Selhara shot back. "Not and stay yourself." Her words struck something deep, but the envoy's voice slid in over them, cold and sure. "You misunderstand. This is not about winning a single battle. This is about shaping all battles to come. The enemy beyond your walls is only the first to fall." The air around Kalen shifted, cold rushing in, carrying with it a scent like burnt metal and dust. Shadows lengthened in unnatural ways, stretching toward him, toward the shard in his hand. Selhara's finger tightened on the trigger. "Kalen, don't make me do this." For a heartbeat, he saw the choice laid bare. To drop the shard would be to remain the man he had been, scarred, mortal, bound to the slow decline of flesh. To keep it was to step into something else entirely, something that would never bleed or tire, something that could outlast empires. The envoy took a single step closer, its mask catching the faint light. "You have been a servant of fate your entire life, Marshal. This is the first time you are being offered command over it." Another detonation rattled the bastion. The ground shook. Somewhere above, the great bell of the citadel tolled once, not by the hand of any priest, but because the stone frame holding it had cracked. Selhara's eyes hardened. "Last chance." Kalen met her gaze. "I'm sorry." The shard's light flared, swallowing the corridor in green fire. His body convulsed as the metal lanced through his veins, threading itself into his bones, his nerves, his very thoughts. He felt himself being rewritten. Selhara fired. The bolt round struck the envoy's shoulder, blasting away part of its cloak, but revealing nothing beneath but a swirl of shadow and metal. The figure didn't flinch. Instead, it simply raised a hand, and the walls themselves seemed to bend inward, swallowing her in darkness. Kalen staggered, the pain fading into an overwhelming rush of strength. The wound in his thigh, the one that had already healed, was gone as though it had never been. His breath came easy despite the dust and cold. His heartbeat was slow, deliberate, unshaken by fear. When the darkness pulled back, Selhara was gone. The envoy's masked face tilted toward him. "Now," it said, "let us end your siege." And together they walked toward the sound of the guns. The gates of the bastion no longer groaned under the strain of battle. They stood wide open, torn from their hinges and flung into the rubble-strewn courtyard. Smoke rolled in through the breach, carrying the scent of burning promethium and scorched flesh. Kalen stepped through the haze, the shard's glow faint beneath his armor, though every movement he made felt guided by something beyond instinct. The defenders saw him first, those who had fought beside him for years, yet none called out his name. Their eyes slid over him as if they could not hold the sight for long, as though his presence was a wound to their memory. Some lowered their weapons in confusion, others tightened their grips, uncertain if the figure before them was truly their marshal. He walked past them without speaking. Each footfall left a faint ring in the air, a sound that was not quite metallic, not quite alive. The enemy beyond the gates hesitated, a wall of ragged troops in scavenged armor, their advance faltering as if an invisible weight pressed against them. At the heart of the invading host stood a warlord in blackened plate, his visor shaped into a permanent snarl. He raised his power axe in a mocking salute. "I've come to claim your city, Kalen. But it seems you've already lost it." Kalen stopped a dozen paces from him, You came to burn stone and flesh. I will burn your name from the memory of the stars." The warlord laughed, a sound more for his soldiers than himself, and lunged forward. The clash should have been deafening, steel on steel, but when the axe fell, Kalen caught it in one hand. No impact, no strain. Just the soft hiss of metal meeting something far older than the forge. The shard's power unfurled inside him. Shadows rippled outward in waves, washing over the enemy ranks. Men and women dropped their weapons, clutching their heads as visions of endless void and unbroken night clawed at their minds. Kalen moved. The axe twisted free of the warlord's grip and spun into the rubble. A blow to the chest plate sent the man sprawling, the ceramite shattering as if struck by a siege cannon. Kalen did not follow to finish the kill. He did not need to. The shard was already drinking the warlord's strength, each breath weaker than the last. From the edges of the courtyard, Selhara's voice rang out, not from the shadows where she had been taken, but from a nearby rampart. She was alive, her armor dented and scorched, her pistol aimed squarely at him. "Kalen, stop this, they're beaten." He turned toward her, and for a heartbeat the world dimmed. The envoy stood beside him without crossing the distance, its presence like frost against his mind. Beaten? Number they will crawl away, rebuild, and return with sharper blades. End it now, and your people will never fear their return. Selhara's voice shook, but her aim did not. Your people will fear you. The enemy began to break, some fleeing into the smoke, others falling to their knees, pleading. Kalen looked at them and saw not enemies, not lives, but threads of a tapestry that could be cut and rewoven into something stronger. His gauntleted hand rose and the shard's light flared. The sky blackened. The cries of the wounded turned to silence. Where the enemy had stood, there was nothing. No bodies, no blood, only a ring of scorched stone marking the boundary of their existence. Selhara's pistol arm dropped, her mouth opening in shock. "What? What did you do?" Kalen turned to her, his voice calm, almost gentle. "I removed the threat." She shook her head. "You removed everything." The envoy's mask tilted toward him, unreadable. "One city stands because you chose as you did. Tomorrow 100 more could stand for the same reason. Will you stop now?" Kalen looked past them, beyond the smoke and the shattered walls, to the dark horizon where other enemies waited, ignorant of what had been born here today. And he felt no doubt at all. The city did not celebrate its salvation. No banners unfurled, no trumpets sounded. The streets were heavy with silence, broken only by the scrape of boots on stone and the low murmurs of those who dared speak at all. The people had seen the courtyard emptied in an instant, had watched friends and foes alike vanish without a trace, and the awe they might have felt was tangled with something colder: fear. Kalen moved through the heart of the city like a shadow wearing armor. The survivors bowed their heads as he passed, but not in respect. Their eyes slid away quickly, as if meeting his gaze might invite the same fate as the warlord's host. He did not slow. The shard's warmth had grown constant now, a presence that pulsed in rhythm with his own heart. Each beat brought with it a whisper of possibilities, how the walls could be remade stronger, how the broken districts could be rebuilt in perfect order, how the chaos of the realm could be burned away forever. Selhara followed at a distance, her steps quick to keep pace. She had not spoken to him since the courtyard, but he could feel her eyes on his back, measuring every movement, every breath. When she finally broke the silence, her voice was low, meant for him alone. "You think you saved them. You didn't. You frightened them into stillness." He stopped before the shattered doors of the council hall, their brass hinges twisted from the siege. "Fear keeps them alive," he said. "Fear of the enemy, yes," she replied. "Fear of you is something else entirely." He didn't answer. The counselors inside rose from their benches as he entered, their faces pale. Some stammered oaths of loyalty, others stared as if they no longer recognized the man they had once trusted with the defense of their realm. One, bolder than the rest, stepped forward. "Marshal Kalen," he began, "we thank you for saving our city, but the means—" Kalen's gaze cut to him and the man's voice faltered. "The means," Kalen repeated, each syllable heavy, "are the reason you're still breathing." The envoy stood in the far corner, unnoticed by all but him, its masked face tilted slightly as if savoring the moment. "They will follow you now," it murmured in his mind, "but only if you leave them no other choice." The council voted within the hour, not because they debated, but because Kalen's presence allowed no delay. Emergency powers were granted to him, every garrison placed under his direct command. He accepted the authority without ceremony. The shard pulsed in satisfaction. That night from the high battlements, he watched the city burn its dead. Columns of smoke rose into the starless sky, and in the glow of the pyres he saw the faces of those he had erased from existence. Not in guilt, but in recognition. Each one was a strand in the web of history, cut so the future could be rewoven. Selhara joined him, her arms folded tight against the cold. "You're not the same man I fought beside," she said quietly. He didn't look at her. "Number I am something better." The envoy's voice slid between them like a blade, and soon the whole world will see it. Kalen did not sleep. The shard made rest unnecessary, replacing dreams with visions, maps of the realm, threads of strategy, and phantom wars fought in the space of a heartbeat. By dawn, the decisions he would make were already set in place, as inevitable as the rising sun. The streets below his balcony were still, save for the sentries who now wore his colors. The council's banners had been taken down in the night, replaced with a sigil of his own design. A sun split by a single black line. Selhara had not protested, though he knew she disapproved. Her silence had become its own form of resistance, a constant weight at his side. Messengers arrived in waves that morning. Reports from the frontier spoke of enemy forces in disarray, their commanders slain or vanished, their armies scattered. Yet others brought darker news. Outlying villages abandoned, fields burned not by invaders but by their own defenders, unwilling to let resources fall into the wrong hands. Kalen listened to each account without expression. The shard's heat flared at every word of destruction, as if drawing strength from the unraveling. In the great square, he addressed the city for the first time since the battle. Thousands gathered, their eyes drawn to him as if by gravity. His voice carried without effort, deep and measured. "The enemy believes our strength was spent in one night. They are wrong. We will take the fight to them, not tomorrow, not in a month, but now. Every soldier will march, every citizen will work. This city will become the spear that pierces their heart." The crowd's reaction was strange. Some cheered, others looked stricken, as though they had been drafted into a war they had not agreed to fight. But no one spoke against him. Not here. Not in the open. Selhara caught him after the speech, her tone tight. "You speak like a conqueror, not a protector. I am what they need me to be," he said. She stepped closer, eyes hard. "And what happens when the war ends? Who will you be then?" He had no answer, only the quiet throb of the shard, urging him onward. That night the envoy returned, walking beside him as if it had always been there. Its mask gleamed faintly in the torchlight. "You are nearly ready," it said, "but the shard is only a fragment. If you want to truly remake this world, you must claim the rest." Kalen's hand tightened around the hilt of his sword. "Where?" The envoy tilted its head toward the horizon, where the mountains were black shapes against the stars. "Beyond the veil, where no mortal has walked in an age." For the first time since the siege, Kalen smiled, not in victory but in anticipation. The war for the city had ended. The war for the world was about to begin. The march to the mountains began under a sky the color of forged steel. Kaelin moved at the head of the column, Selhara riding a pace behind, her silence unbroken since their last argument. The shard pulsed steadily against his chest, keeping the exhaustion of the climb at bay. Around them the army stretched for miles, soldiers hardened by the siege, conscripts barely more than boys, smiths and masons pressed into service to build what they could not yet imagine. The road was no road at all, only a winding scar through jagged rock and frost-bitten earth. The air thinned with each step, making breath a labor. Yet Kaelin pressed them on, refusing to slow. He told them the enemy would not wait, that to falter here was to die. Some believed him. Others followed because fear had left them no choice. 3 days into the climb, they reached the edge of the Vale. It was not a place so much as an absence, a wall of shifting mist that devoured the horizon, its colors wrong, its movements unnatural. The soldiers muttered prayers. Even Selhara's gaze wavered. The envoy appeared then, emerging from the mist as if it had been carved from it. "Beyond here, your army will not survive," it said. "The Vale swallows mortals whole. If you cross, it will be with only those who are altered." Its mask turned toward Kaelin's chest, where the shard's light leaked faintly through his armor. Kaelin knew what it meant. The shard had already begun to change him, his strength unnatural, his senses sharpened, his dreams replaced by visions. He could cross. Perhaps Selhara could too if she accepted the shard's gift. That night he went among the soldiers, choosing a handful without explaining why. He offered them a choice: step forward and take what he offered, or remain behind to hold the pass. Most refused. A few accepted, and the shard burned in his palm as he pressed it to their skin, leaving them gasping, shaking, eyes wide with a light that was not their own. Selhara found him at the edge of camp, her voice low. "You're making them into something else. You're making yourself into something else." He met her gaze, and for the first time she seemed afraid. Not of the path ahead, but of him. If we are to survive what lies beyond, we cannot remain what we were. By dawn, the Chosen stood beside him, silent and unblinking. Together they stepped into the Vale. The mist closed around them, swallowing the sound of the army's voices, the sight of the world they had left. Inside there was no up or down, no day or night, only shifting shapes, whispers in forgotten tongues, and the sense of being watched by things too vast to see. The shard burned hotter with every step, guiding him towards something deeper, older, and far more dangerous than the war he had left behind. The Vale was a labyrinth without walls, a place where distance meant nothing and direction was a lie. Kaelin walked as if the mist itself parted for him, though the Chosen behind him moved with stiff, unnatural precision, their eyes reflecting faint glimmers of the shard's light. Selhara kept close, her breath uneven, her hand never straying far from the hilt of her blade. Shadows shifted in the corner of their vision, shapes that might have been towers or mountains or colossal creatures sleeping in silence. Sometimes they heard footsteps behind them matching their own, but turning revealed only the endless haze. Time became meaningless. Hunger faded, thirst vanished. The shard sustained them, but at the cost of something Kaelin could not yet name. On the 4th day, or perhaps the 40th, they reached the river of glass. It stretched across their path, its surface frozen yet fluid, reflecting not their bodies but moments from their pasts. Kaelin saw himself as a boy kneeling beside the body of his father. Selhara saw something too, though she turned away before he could glimpse it. The Chosen crossed without hesitation, their feet making no sound, but when Kaelin stepped onto it, the shard flared and the reflections shifted. He saw himself crowned, a city burning in the distance. Selhara standing at his side with a face devoid of warmth. They pressed on until the mist grew darker, the whispers louder. A shape loomed ahead, neither man nor beast, but something in between. Its body a shifting lattice of bone and light. It did not move, yet Kalen felt its attention settle on him like a weight. "Bearer," it spoke, its voice both in his ears and in his thoughts. "You carry a fragment of my prison." Kalen's hand went to the shard instinctively. "Yours? A piece torn away when the worlds were young. Return it, and I will grant you passage through the veil unharmed. Keep it, and I will hunt you beyond this place until nothing remains." Selhara stepped forward. "We don't even know what you are. I am the warden of chains. I am the shadow between realms. I am the end you do not yet believe in." Kalen's mind burned with possibilities. The shard had saved him, given him strength, and yet, if it truly belonged to this creature, what power could be unleashed if it were returned? What destruction might follow if he refused? He did not answer. Instead, he stepped closer, feeling the air tighten around him. The warden's form shifted, towering above, its light burning through the mist. Selhara's hand brushed his arm, a silent plea to turn back. But Kalen could not. Somewhere deep inside, the shard pulsed in rhythm with his heart, and he knew that giving it up would be more than surrender. It would be erasing the very force that was shaping him into what he was meant to become. "I will keep it," he said at last. The warden's light dimmed, its voice turning to a whisper of frost and steel. "Then your path is set, and so is mine." The mist closed in again, and the creature was gone. But Kalen felt its gaze linger, waiting for the moment he would falter. The veil thinned at last, its choking haze giving way to a sky of fractured light. Kalen stepped forward, his boots sinking into soil that was not soil, shifting like ash, yet holding the weight of his steps. Selhara emerged beside him, her eyes darting to the jagged horizon where towers of black stone clawed at the heavens. The Chosen followed in perfect silence, their movements too precise, their faces still blank masks. Here the air was different, heavy. Every breath tasted faintly of iron, and each exhale left a faint mist that refused to fade. The shard in Kalen's grip thrummed, pulling toward the distant spires as though the stones themselves were calling it home. They marched for hours without pause, though the sky never shifted, locked in a half-light that made it impossible to tell if it was dawn or dusk. Shapes moved far off in the wasteland, things that crawled and slithered yet vanished when Kalen tried to focus on them. When the first ruin appeared, it was like stumbling upon the bones of a god. Vast gates lay broken, their hinges rusted to powder. Carvings along the walls depicted figures kneeling before a crowned ruler. But the ruler's face had been gouged away in every image. Selhara brushed her fingers across one of the defaced carvings. Someone wanted to erase them, not just kill, erase. Inside, the ruins whispered, not in words, but in a low, ceaseless hum that gnawed at the edge of thought. The Chosen did not react, but Kalen felt his pulse quicken. Every step deeper seemed to awaken something in the walls. A column cracked and shifted as they passed, shedding dust like old skin. In the heart of the ruin lay a dais, its surface covered in sigils carved so deep they looked like wounds. The shard flared violently, nearly slipping from Kalen's grasp. Selhara reached for him, but he stepped onto the dais before she could stop him. The air thickened. The hum became a voice, ancient, patient, and cold. "You carry my heart, little thief." Kalen froze. "Your heart? Once I ruled here. Once they feared my name. Then they bound me, broke me, scattered me into pieces too small to rise again. Yet here you stand, with the piece they feared most." Selhara drew her blade, scanning the shadows. Show yourself. I have no form left to show. But give me the shard, and I will make you more than a king. You will not just rule, you will endure. Kaelin's fingers tightened around the shard. The offer was poison, but the weight of it was intoxicating. He thought of the burning cities in his visions, the crown of iron, the people bowing, not from fear, but from inevitability. The ground trembled. Cracks spiderwebbed outward from the dais, glowing with the same cold light as the shard. Selhara stepped in front of him. Caelin, this is wrong. He met her gaze, but said nothing. From the shadows, a figure began to take shape. Smoke coiling into limbs, a crown forming from strands of darkness. The voice was no longer just in his mind. It filled the ruin. Choose. Caelin's heartbeat and the shard's pulse merged into one. And though he knew the cost, he also knew his answer. The darkness before him solidified into a towering figure, no longer smoke, but a silhouette carved from void and flame. Its crown burned with an inner fire, casting flickering shadows that danced like desperate souls against the crumbling walls. The voice echoed now, both thunder and whisper. You hold the power to reclaim what was lost, or to become the ruin that follows. Caelin's gaze did not waver. The shard burned fiercely in his hand, and with it came a surge of clarity and madness entwined. I will not be your prisoner, he said, nor your savior. I will be the master of my own fate. The figure laughed, a sound that split the air like shattered glass. Pride is the first chain of the enslaved. Tell me, bearer, how long before your resolve cracks? Behind him, Selhara's breath hitched. She gripped her sword tighter, watching the spectral monarch with eyes wide as the shadows closed in. Caelin felt the weight of the ages pressing down on him. The countless rulers who had risen and fallen, consumed by the very power they sought to wield. But within the shard's core, he sensed something else. Hope, stubborn and fierce, buried beneath eons of sorrow. I am no king of ashes, Caelin declared. I will forge a new empire, one that endures beyond blood and bone. The Warden of Chains stepped forward from the darkness, its many eyes glowing like embers. Then accept your fate, bearer. Bind yourself fully to the shard, and your enemies will fall like dust. But beware, the price is not yours alone to pay. Caelin reached into the depths of himself, feeling the shard respond, expanding its tendrils of light and shadow through his veins. Pain, ecstasy, and cold infinity crashed over him in waves. His vision blurred, and for a moment he saw the future. Cities ablaze, stars dying, and empires crumbling beneath his will. Selhara's voice broke through the tempest. Caelin, come back to me! He reached out, longing for the world he was slipping from, but the shard's power anchored him in a place beyond mortal reach. The dark figure knelt, bowing its crown. Rise, sovereign of the shard, the last hope and the final curse. Caelin's form shimmered, his flesh and armor melding with the shard's strange energy. He was becoming legend and nightmare both. A living weapon forged from betrayal, ambition, and ancient power. As the ruins trembled, the first whisper of a new empire stirred in the silence. The air in the ruins thickened as Caelin's transformation completed, the shard's cold light radiating from him like a second sun. His skin gleamed with unnatural sheen. The edges of his armor fused with swirling patterns that seemed alive, threads of emerald and obsidian dancing beneath the surface. Where once stood a man, now stood something both more and less, a fusion of mortal will and alien might. Selhara watched from the shadows, her heart torn between awe and terror. She had followed him into darkness, fought beside him through impossible odds, and yet the being before her was a stranger. She stepped forward, voice barely more than a whisper. What have you become? Caelin's eyes met hers. still his, yet distant, reflecting the endless void. What I had to be. To save this world, I needed to become more than a man. The shard is no longer a gift, it is part of me. Around them, the ruins began to pulse with life. Cracks in the stone shimmered and healed, ancient glyphs reigniting with forgotten power. From the depths, whispers rose, voices of long-dead architects of empire calling Kalen their heir. The envoy emerged beside him, silent but watchful, its mask reflecting the flickering light. The power you wield is a double-edged sword. It will build, and it will destroy. You walk a path that few can follow, and none can return from unchanged. Kalen nodded, a slow, deliberate movement. Then I will walk it alone if I must. Selhara's eyes burned with unshed tears. You don't have to. He reached for her hand, but hesitation stopped him. In his new form, the distance between them felt immense, a gulf carved from time and change. I fear that by the time this ends, neither of us will recognize what remains. Outside, the horizon shifted, storms gathering in unnatural patterns, stars dimming in the sky. The war had spread beyond the city, across the continent, and now threatened to consume the world itself. Kalen raised his hand, and the shard's light flared, sending ripples through the land. Let the world bear witness. The age of man is ending. The age of the shard begins. And as the winds howled through the ancient stones, the first tremors of a new empire stirred, one born from sacrifice, shadow, and the ruthless desire to endure. The horizon cracked beneath thunderous skies, a tempest rising not only in the heavens but within the hearts of men and gods alike. Kalen stood atop the highest spire of the blackened city, the shard's pulse sinking with the storm's fury. Below, armies massed, some loyal, many broken, and others whispering of rebellion. The empire he had forged with unyielding will now trembled on the edge of ruin, fragile as the brittle bones of the ancient ruins beneath his feet. Selhara approached, her armor battered, eyes stormed with conflict. "The council conspires," she said, voice edged with sorrow. "They fear what you have become and what you might do next." Kalen turned, the shard's glow casting eerie shadows across his face, half immortal, half man. "Fear is a weapon," he replied, "but a blade that cuts both ways." The storm broke then, rain lashing like cold knives, washing away the dust of countless battles. Messengers arrived, bearing news of betrayal. A trusted lieutenant had pledged allegiance to the Empire's enemies. A city had fallen under the banner of rebellion, and whispers of assassination stirred in the shadows. Kalen clenched his fist, the shard flaring bright, feeding on his fury. They will learn what it means to defy the sovereign of the shard. Yet beneath the rage was a fissure, a doubt that gnawed like acid at the edges of his soul. Had he become the very darkness he vowed to conquer? Was this empire a fortress or a cage? Selhara's hand found his, steady and warm. "Remember who you are," she urged. "Before the shard, before the power." His gaze softened, but the fire in his eyes remained. "I am the future and the past. I carry their blood and their chains." Lightning split the sky as the first assault began. War drums thundered from every corner of the realm, heralding a reckoning not just of armies, but of ideals and souls. In that storm of steel and sorcery, Kalen faced not only the enemy without, but the betrayal within. A crucible that would forge or shatter the last hope of his empire. The clash of steel and sorcery tore through the night like a tempest unleashed. Kalen stood at the heart of the battlefield, the shard's glow casting eerie light upon shattered ranks and fallen banners. Around him, the screams of dying soldiers were drowned by the roar of arcane engines and the crackle of energy weapons. Amid the chaos, the traitor emerged. A figure cloaked in shadows, once a brother in arms, now a harbinger of ruin. His eyes burned with bitter hatred as he raised his blade to strike at Kaelin's side. The attack was swift, fueled by years of resentment and ambition. Kaelin's reflexes, honed beyond mortal limits, caught the blow, but the pain seared through his form, reminding him that even the shard could not make him invincible. The battlefield seemed to slow around them, the two locked in a deadly dance of blade and will. "Why betray us?" Kaelin demanded, voice low and fierce. The traitor sneered. "Because your empire is built on chains. Chains you wear proudly but refuse to see. You've become what you once fought against." Selhara's voice cut through the tempest, sharp as a dagger. "Kaelin, don't let the shard consume you." The words echoed inside him, stirring a conflict deeper than any wound. The shard pulsed, urging domination, power, absolute control. Yet the memory of who he was, a man, flawed and mortal, flickered like a fragile flame. With a roar, Kaelin unleashed the shard's power, a wave of energy that blasted the traitor back, shattering his armor and silencing his defiance. Yet instead of finishing him, Kaelin hesitated, the shard's light dimming as doubt crept in. The traitor lay broken, yet alive, and in that moment Kaelin understood the true cost of his choices. The lives shattered, the trust broken, the empire teetering on the edge of collapse. He turned away from the battlefield, Selhara at his side, the weight of sacrifice heavy upon them both. The war was far from over, but the greatest battle was now within, the battle to save what remained of his soul. The first light of dawn filtered through the shattered windows of the council chamber, casting long shadows over broken stone and scattered relics. Kaelin stood alone amid the ruins of what had once been a proud empire, the shard dimmed to a faint glow against his chest. His armor was scarred, his face etched with exhaustion deeper than any wound. Outside, the world was quiet, a fragile silence born from the ashes of countless battles. The cities he had built, the armies he had commanded, all had crumbled under the weight of ambition and betrayal. The cost of immortality was clear now. Endless loss, endless watching as friends turned to enemies, as empires rose only to fall into dust. Selhara entered quietly, her steps careful on the cracked floor. She held no words, only the weight of shared sorrow. Kaelin met her gaze, and for a moment the distance between them vanished, two souls tethered by sacrifice and regret. "I thought power would save us," Kaelin said, voice rough and hollow. "But all it did was bind me to this endless cycle." She stepped closer, her hand reaching out to touch the shard. "Perhaps it's not the power itself, but how we choose to wield it." He looked down at the fragment, its light flickering like a dying star. "I wanted to remake the world, to build something eternal. Instead, I became the architect of its ruin." Outside, the skies darkened as distant storms gathered, a reminder that even endings are beginnings. Kaelin turned toward the window, watching the horizon where fading suns bled into twilight. "Maybe this is the true price of immortality," he whispered. "To carry the weight of every choice, every betrayal, every loss, until there is nothing left but memory." Selhara's voice was steady, filled with quiet hope. "Then let that memory be a guide, not a chain." Kaelin nodded, a slow acceptance settling over him. The empire was gone, the hero fallen, but in the silence a fragile seed of something new took root. An ember in the dark, waiting for a time when it might bloom once more. The shard faded to black, its final light extinguished as the chamber crumbled around them. And in that stillness, the last stand ended, not with glory, but with the solemn echo of a choice made and a price paid.